Let's be honest, caring for someone with dementia is one of the toughest jobs on the planet. It's emotionally and physically draining. But what if the biggest challenges we face aren't what they seem? What if there's a completely different way to look at this?
And check out this quote, because it really hits the nail on the head. When caregivers get overwhelmed, it's almost never because they don't care enough. It's because the system they're working in, the very way we've been taught to do things, often sets everyone up for frustration and burnout.
And this right here, this is what we're calling the caregiver's catch-22. You're pouring your heart into providing meaningful, dignified care, but the system itself seems to be working against you. This is the fundamental conflict we're going to unpack. So let's dive in by looking at the biggest challenge of all.
So what's the single biggest hurdle? Well, it often comes down to what the experts call responsive behaviors. But here's the twist. Instead of seeing them as problems we need to fix, we're going to reframe them as clues we need to decode.
You know what I'm talking about. Aggression, agitation, wandering, refusing care. Our first instinct, our training, is usually to try and stop these behaviors, right? To control them. But that's just exhausting, and it often leaves caregivers feeling like they've failed. But what if these behaviors aren't the problem at all? What if they're actually signals of an unmet need?
This is the absolute key pivot. We have to stop asking, how do we stop this, and start asking a totally different question. What is this behavior telling us? What is the person trying to say, or protect, or maybe even regain? It's a massive shift from control to curiosity, and believe me, it is a total game changer. Okay, so this huge shift from control to curiosity isn't just a nice idea. It's actually the foundation of a really powerful framework called the Montessori-inspired lifestyle. We're just going to call it MIL for short.
So the big idea here is simple but profound. All behavior, especially the challenging stuff, is communication. The MIL approach basically trains caregivers to become detectives, to look upstream for the root cause of the distress. Is it a loss of control? Is the room too noisy? Are they just trying to tell us something they can't find the words for? When you address the cause, the behavior often just goes away.
All right, so that's the theory. But how does this actually play out in the real world, in those day-to-day moments? Let's get practical and look at a couple of examples.
So here's the classic scenario, right? Verbal communication starts to break down. Words get jumbled, sentences don't make sense. And what do we tend to do? We double down. We ask more questions, we try to reason. But honestly, that often just ramps up the confusion and the anxiety for everybody.
But the MIL approach flips this completely. Instead of relying on words, you use demonstration. You show what you mean. You don't just tell. You use visual cues. You set up the environment to give them hints. This takes a huge weight off their brain, It taps into abilities that stick around a lot longer than speech does, which makes it so much easier for them to understand and to participate. Oh man, daily care. This is where things can get really tough. We've all been there. Simple tasks like bathing or getting dressed can feel like a constant battle. The focus just becomes, we have to get this job done, and if the person resists, we see it as them being difficult or non-compliant. And this is where it gets really, really cool. Instead of care being something that's done to a person, it becomes a partnership, something you do with them. By offering tiny little choices, like which sleeve should we do first, or letting them feel the water temperature, you're giving back a little piece of control. And you would be absolutely amazed at how often that resistance just melts away.
So as you can probably tell by now, this is about so much more than just a few clever techniques. It's about building an entire system, a whole environment that supports both the person with dementia and their caregivers. Let's see how that works on a bigger scale.
Think about it. In a lot of care settings, inconsistency is a massive source of anxiety. One staff member does things one way, the next person is completely different. That's scary. The Montessori-inspired lifestyle fixes that. It creates a shared system, a shared language, and shared routines. It creates a predictable world. And for someone living with dementia, predictability feels like safety. And the result? Well, it's a true win-win. For residents, it's about so much more than just getting through the day. It's about having dignity, finding a sense of purpose, and feeling emotionally safe. And for the caregivers, this is huge. They get tools that actually work, which builds their confidence. It gives them a sense of agency, and it drastically reduces that crushing burnout we talked about at the very beginning.
So, if there is one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. Those so-called responsive behaviors, they are not a sign of failure. Not for the person with dementia, and not for you, the caregiver. They are signals. They're a roadmap, pointing us toward better, more humane, more compassionate care. And by learning how to read that map,
we can create a future where everyone touched by dementia is treated with the dignity they absolutely deserve.